Welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living, a show where we talk to experts who've taken a wild idea and made it a reality so you can too. From people who have sailed around the world to those who've started thriving businesses and even broken records, some of the wildest ideas can lead to the most rewarding adventures. I'm your host, Shelby Stanger, and I hope you enjoy this show. This is episode 10 with author, surfer, and meditation teacher Jaimal Yogis. This episode was brought to you by the Surf Diva Surf School. I've taught at Surf Diva for years and seen hundreds of men and women learn to ride waves, and it literally changes their lives. If you go to surfdiva.com and book a lesson online or on the phone, tell them the code WILD IDEAS, you'll get a $10 gift card to use towards your next lesson or in store. This episode was also brought to you by Graced by Grit. I love this female-owned brand because they're all about helping women cultivate their grit to find their grace. They also make kick-ass activewear clothes. I can literally go running in my yoga pants from Graced by Grit, throw them in a ball, wear them the next day, and they still look great. And they fit amazing, which is always important when you're running and doing yoga and all sorts of active activities, living wildly. If you go to gracedbygrit.com and enter code WILDIdeas, you'll get 20% off your first order. Welcome to episode 10 of Wild Ideas Worth Living. Jaimal Yogis wrote The Saltwater Buddah, which became a movie and is an amazing book. He also wrote the book, The Fear Project, a bestseller, and the kids' book, Turtles Don't Surf. We pretty much cover it all on this podcast. I might stumble on the first question, but the rest of the podcast flows really nicely. Jaimal's voice is also calming and zen, so it's a nice one to listen to on the road. We talk about running away from home, about meditation, about fear, love, having kids, politics, surfing giant waves, death, life. Jaimal is a thinker and he really gets deep in this one. We also talk about his new book coming out this summer. Jaimal was a work acquaintance. He's become a good friend. He's a great speaker. I really hope you enjoy this show. All right, today we have Jaimal Yogis, author, surfer, meditation guru, all-around awesome guy. He has a film. Jaimal, you've done so many great things. So welcome to Wild Ideas Worth Living. I'm really excited to have you on. I'm just going to get right into it. So you've had a lot of wild ideas from since you were a teenager. You ran away from home to surf in Hawaii as a teen. Then you went to a Buddhist monastery. You went to Columbia Journalism School to be a journalist. You wrote a book. That book kicked butt. It became a movie. You wrote another book that forced you to surf big waves like Mavericks. You got married, had kids. You're doing another book. All of these wild ideas have to have involved some element of getting over fear and self-doubt. I'm just trying to look, what has been the common theme that's kind of threaded through all of these wild ideas?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shelby. It's good to be here, and I'm excited about this show. I've been listening, and you've had some awesome people on, so it's an honor to be queued up. At the risk of sounding cliche, I think it's really been looking into my heart when I'm in that moment of like where, we all have all these forks in the road, and you basically we're always doing this dance between security and freedom. It's like, do I go the safe route or do I go the route where my vision is calling? And sometimes they line up where your vision is calling you to something more secure and you follow that, but sometimes it's not. Like when I got that wild idea to run away from home at 16, and I was on, probation for drunk driving, and was just getting into a lot of trouble in high school. I was an ordinary high school kid. I think I was just always the one who got caught. But I mean, I remember from that first moment that was actually inspired by some dreams that I'd had about where I was surfing, and I was in tropical water, and I was living in Sacramento at the time, landlocked and skating a lot. And in the dreams, I just felt free, and I realized that I felt sort of caged in my suburban life where I kept getting roped into, the popularity contest or, the ridiculous aspects of high school more than I wanted to be. I had a lot of great friends too, but it's really that pattern that I've seen emerge again and again in my life is like, I'm getting caught in the churn of what I should be doing or what it seems like what society is telling me is popular or normal. And I compare myself to those who are being the most loved and then start to go in that direction rather than following really what I know to be true, like my core values, my dreams. And so in that case, I remember it was really like first of all, I was in the place where I just felt like I was hitting my head against a wall. I kept getting in trouble and I wasn't happy. And so I think sometimes you just have to reach that breaking point to really break through fear. And it's one of the reasons why now in my meditation classes and stuff, I teach people to look at every fear and every hardship as a gift, because it's those moments when you're down that you really can look deep and say, okay, what do I need to do to change this? I can't keep going in this direction. And in that case, it was, I think it helped to be 16 and not have as much like prefrontal cortex built up and, telling me not to go, and just getting that one-way ticket and leaping, was just trusting my own inner vision. And as you know, I wrote the Fear Project and I studied all this neuroscience and interviewed all these psychologists about the way that people overcome fear. And even after I have all that data accessible in my head of like what I could do to overcome this fear in the moment. And sometimes I go to that, like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. I'm going to, use these tricks that I learned from the neuropsychologist. But more than anything, it's still just getting quiet and, listening to, for lack of a better word, my heart about where I want to be, and then taking and then giving it a go. And sometimes it's a matter of trial and error. I think a lot of times I've gone down a road that, doesn't feel right. And so I know I have to readjust. And I think that's where meditation and surfing have been so helpful to me, is just, they're both places where I can sort of block off the noise and start to listen.
Yeah, what I love about all of your books, and they're all memoirs, so we all get to know you really well. When you wrote Saltwater Buddah, you end up going to a Buddhist monastery, and you think you're going to be a Buddhist monk, but there gets to be a point where you're like, no, I like girls. Like, I want to have a relationship and not be celibate for the rest of my life. And then you do the Fear Project and you go surf big waves, but you have your limits. You surf 30-foot Mavericks, which is giant. But my guess is that then, you don't go to Nazaré in Portugal and go surf that. So, so you drop in and you conquer your fears and you're okay with that, but you pivot as well, which I've always thought was, or you sort of like do the fear and then, you conquer it, but you don't keep going, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is static, right? It's like our what we want is always changing, and sometimes you need to sort of shatter one fear that's holding you back in order to find out that that was sort of a phantom of some sort that you didn't need really to deal with. It's like, for me, Mavericks was this thing where it was haunting me. It was like, it's down the street from my house in San Francisco. A bunch of my friends surfed there. I kept thinking, I didn't really have this desire to be a big wave surfer, but I had this desire to prove that I could do it. And then I would get sort of angry at myself for being like, I don't have anything to prove. And I think I really needed the intellectual challenge of like writing a book about fear to motivate myself to do it. So I had an excuse like, oh, this isn't about me and my like, proving I have the cojones. It's about, research for the betterment for the book, and which will hopefully help people. But, after I went out there, I trained out here at Ocean Beach, and after I went out and got it out of my system, it was funny that sort of adolescent part of myself that needed to just show myself that I could do it, that I could, be one of the boys out there, was like, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. Thank God I don't need to do this anymore, because the whole thing about Mavs is that for me, I surf to have, moments of peace and tranquility mixed with adrenaline. But out there, it was, crowded, menacing. I was out the night Sion Milowski died, and that was my last session out there. And I was just like, this isn't my path. I know that there are some big wave surfers who that's where their heart is. That's where they find their bliss, and, more power to them. But I realized that's not mine. But I needed to go through that hoop in order to free myself up a little bit. It's like to satisfy, teenage Jaimal and be like, okay, stop squawking now. I have other mountains to climb. And I think that was true to some extent with the monastery too, is you have these sort of versions of yourself that you need to satisfy. And then once you've gone down that road, you bring with you that part of you that you learned at Mavericks or at the monastery, but then you realize it was a stepping stone to something else.
Can I just ask you one tactical question? There's so many listeners that are surfers, including myself. What is one tactic you use to just conquer fear or to deal with the fear of big waves?
In the water? Well, what I learned in the Fear Project was really, all the neuroscience for really the way we conquer a fear, like a physical fear, like a snake or a big wave, is that we take positive steps toward facing our fear. So you don't want to go from, surfing Waikiki to just being like, I can do this, screw it, I'm going to surf Mavericks, and just find yourself out there. You want to, grade up to that point. So, and feel really confident in waves that are as close to Mavericks as you can get before you go to the real thing. So it's really, I had a mantra that I developed, which was prepare, flow, prepare, let go. And for things that are like Mavericks, where you're going to be facing real danger, you've got to do the prep work to basically to really prepare and to trick your mind into feeling comfortable. So when you're out there, you can be like, I worked for this. I know that I've done everything I need to do to feel safe. And now it's the time to flow and let go when you're out there. And when you do that, there's a few tricks that I have, which one is like, if you feel yourself sort of almost going and then and hesitating, and you're like, I know I have to just push over the ledge, is actually you feel fear and you feel frustration. And oftentimes you frame that fear as like, oh no, I feel afraid and now I'm going to do worse. And what I try to do is flip it on its head right away. It's like, hey, you know what this fear is doing? You know what this frustration is? It's energy in my body. My body's going through a fight or flight. And what it's doing is saying it's getting ready to fight the bear, the saber-toothed tiger. So it's actually giving me more adrenaline and giving me more energy that I need. And this is good. And so I almost like, in that way that you would be like a lion, like, roar, like I'm ready to go. You paddle harder and you say, and you use that frustration to be like, okay, the next wave that comes that looks good, like I'm not backing off no matter what, I'm going. And, again, it's sort of like, just like in life where you get to that breaking point and you're like, I'm tired of hesitating. I have to push over, and using the frustration as energy to break through. There's lots of other things too. You know, I focus on my breathing. I try to get out of, my head and into my body. I remind myself that there's a bunch of other people who have done this and fallen, and they're okay. So, kind of psyching yourself out, like shutting down the worries with some logic, and then going back into your body. Because when you go back to your body and your breath and use your breath as an anchor, you're basically telling your ancient fear center that things are okay. You're sort of, your ancient fear center in your brain can't really always understand your logical reasoning. But as soon as your breath is even and calm and you can come back to that, it starts to actually believe that you are safe. And so if you're over the line of fear, you really using the breath as an anchor in all aspects of life is always one that I rely on.
This is great advice. Thank you, Jaimal. You wrote the Fear Project and surfed these waves before you had kids. And I don't even know if kids were always in the plans or not. But what lessons did you learn from writing and studying the science of fear that then applied to having kids, which is a full other adventure?
Yeah, I mean, by far, I think I was way more scared to propose and then way more scared to be a dad than I was to paddle out at Mavericks or do anything in the surfing realm or snowboarding or any of those sports that I do. I think because, what so many of us who love the outdoors and love adventure, what we pride, what is the most important to us is our leisure and that feeling of being out in the wild. It's what we live for. And when anything that took away from that, I mean, in all my relationships, I was always a commitment phobe a little bit, because it was like anything that took away from that could be, robbing me of my happiness, I felt. And so it was interesting. I remember I was actually writing the Fear Project and researching it when I took my then girlfriend, Amy, my wife, to Vancouver Island and was getting ready to propose. And, this time I knew I had that feeling, like intellectually, I know that this is what I want to do. And I could not get my body to physically do it. Like I could not get the ring out of my bag to do it. And
for you listening, Amy is a badass and she's such a kick-ass wife, but go on. Sorry. So you couldn't get
on Vancouver Island, and it was like we were doing all these adventures, like going kayaking, we were going surfing, we just like hiking, and we're staying in this beautiful new hotel up there because I was doing a writing project. And so it was like every day could have been the day, and it was like day 6 and we had to leave the next day, and I still hadn't gotten the ring out. And it was funny. I remember I was like, all right, what do I need, to get over the hump here? Like, what am I worried about? And growing up, my dad was a big fan of the musical Man of La Mancha, which is like the story of Don Quixote. And there were all these songs like, that I knew from my childhood, like to dream the impossible dream, to, fight the impossible foe, all these. And I think because my parents are divorced, the thing that my body was reacting to was like marriage still seemed impossible. It seemed like the impossible dream to have a marriage that would like increase your happiness rather than take away from it. And I think my childhood self still believed that. And so it was actually, I was like, Amy had never seen the movie, so I rented it on purpose and we put it on, and that actually that was like the thing. You never know what it's going to be. That was the thing that did push me over the ledge, and I proposed the next day at the tide pools, and I've never regretted it. But it was again though, I mean, each time it was kind of trying to getting out of my head and into my heart or back to my, breath and body. Like just same when we started having the discussion about kids, it was like, I never planned for kids, was always said, well, if I meet the right person and then it's all good. We'll do it. If not, I think I could be perfectly happy without kids. And with Amy, it felt right, but I was still freaking out. And, I didn't watch Man of La Mancha that time.
But now you have 3 boys. You have
we have 3
powerhouse little surf team going on there.
I can't even believe it. I don't know what happened, but it's fun. It's fun. It is an extreme sport. I mean, I think it's why I don't need any part of Mavericks anymore. It's just like every day is an extreme sport.
I can only imagine. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this new book. I got a small taste. I'm a slow reader. I'm sorry. But first, I just want to ask you about your name. I always just assumed, your last name is Yogis. I thought it was like Yogi. It looks like Yogi with an S. I always just assumed your parents were super hippies and the name Jaimal. I'm just going to read. Can I read one line of your book? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. It says, either way, if the name Jaimal is making you picture me as a black man, or the yogi Buddhist history is conjuring images of my family as shiny, happy, furry people raising goats in Mendocino, stop. Goats would have been lovely, and I can grow a decent afro thanks to the Jewish roots, but much to the chagrin of my hip-hop obsessed 12-year-old self, I'm white. That's funny. So can you just tell me a little bit about, and I know this whole book runs, sorry if I didn't read it really well, but there's a lot of humor in your writing. You make fun of yourself. You're really a great writer, but just tell me a little bit about this last name, especially.
Yeah, well, Yogis is, it looks like Yogis, is a Lithuanian name, and most of my dad's side of the family and some of my moms are from Lithuania, up, near Russia. And apparently Lithuanian is the closest European language to Sanskrit. So we often, because a lot of my family is interested in yoga and meditation, we often joke that there was like some link back before like the Aryans came down to India. But yeah, no, it's just coincidence. And then my parents, my dad was in the military. My mom comes from a long line of military men. So, but my parents were rebels and sort of in their hippie phase when they named me after a yogi. So I have a Indian first name and a name. So it looks like, I was planning to be a guru, and now I've been dabbling in that. So I guess my name worked out in the end. I
love it. So your next book, All Our Waves Are Water, comes out, I guess, this summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, July 4th.
July 4th. Okay, so what I had a sneak peek for those of you listening, but what I really think is interesting about this book is you talk about surfing and you talk about God. And no one does that. I mean, not many people that I know. I mean, there was West of Jesus, but this is a really unique exploration. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it was, I never, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have been writing about God, I would have probably laughed. But I think one of the things that I was talking about earlier, how you go down paths and that sometimes you need to explore that don't feel quite right. And the going down that path helps remind you who you really are. 'Cause you're like, well, if this isn't right, then, who am I or what do I really believe? And so, I've always been sort of a seeker, majored in philosophy and religion, lived in the Buddhist Monastery, and was also really enamored with science. And I went back and forth between wanting to be a scientist, a philosopher, a monk. And after writing the Fear Project, where it's like a pop science book, right? Where I'm like, taking everything, only what we can prove scientifically, and writing that. And I put my emotions in there and stuff, but I don't really allow myself to speculate about the big questions. Why are we here? Afterlife? Is there an intelligence in the universe? Is there a force of compassion? These things that mystics have talked about, which have been a big part of my life, but I was really up through writing the Fear Project, I always kept those a little bit private, and I also would question them in myself. I would be like, do you really believe that? Do you really believe there's a force of good in the universe that is that connects all beings, or is that just sort of like a cute thing that mystics have said to make us feel better? And I think writing a book purely about science and then trying to use the tools, I kept realizing that the things that really helped me get through fear, and the things that helped, that really my compass was a deeper faith in the fact that we are all connected, and that there is a basic sort of force of love in the universe, or a force of good that I think a lot of people call God. And so I went, it really forced me to look at like, what do I believe? What is my faith? And to look at how my support and belief in science actually, I think, can live happily with this faith I have in a greater love that connects us sort of at the root. And so I wanted to explore that. I wanted to explore it in myself. And, the metaphor that I use again and again in All Our Waves Are Water is that, we as beings who see ourselves as completely separate are much more like waves on the ocean, where we have a unique identity, but we're part of the ocean. Our true identity is water. And so the metaphor in this is that sort of God is water, and we are all waves, and all the phenomena that exist in the universe are waves. And that, through yoga, through service, through connecting to nature, through surfing, that we can be more in tune with the water aspect of ourselves and not just caught up in the selfish churn of the wave. And so, that's something that I feel like I've experienced again and again in my life through, being up on the mountain, or being in the water, or being on my Zafu meditating, or just, falling in love. And so I wanted to write about that from the heart and be like, this is the real me. Like, if I'm going to be somebody who writes about my life, I need to totally crack my head and heart open and be like, this is what I really believe, folks. And I've had to test that myself. And so I felt like this is the most real book that I've been able to write so far.
Cool. And you travel, right? There's some Himalayas, maybe Jerusalem. I don't know. I'm not all the way there.
Yeah, it's got a lot of, the India, Indonesia, Jerusalem, Palestine, wow. New York, San Francisco, Mexico. It's quite a bit of surfing, but also some just time out on the road. And mostly, times that I've made big mistakes and learned from those.
Okay, I want to ask you about a lot of things right now. Really quickly, what's a Zafu? I know this sounds inept that I'm asking you, but I don't know.
Zafu is a little cushion you sit on for meditation, like those little round ones. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Now I know what to send you for Christmas.
Awesome. My friend just started a meditation cushion company, but they're amazing. Where you're teaching, I love that you said for Christmas too. It's so funny talking about faith. You're teaching meditation retreats now, and this is a new wild idea. What kind of meditation do you teach?
I mean, I've gone back to just teaching the basic mindfulness meditation, which there's so much like scientific research on, which is basically just sitting down and being with whatever's in front of you. So when you sit down, usually you have your breathing. And so you use your breath, just focus on the sensations of your body. And then you realize you're getting, you're drifting away with a bunch of thoughts and stories like, oh, I should be, working right now. Or, I wonder if I should have said that at lunch. And then you come back to your breathing. And it sounds ridiculously simple. Like, shouldn't you be doing something more? And there are lots of other meditation techniques. But I teach that one because, it's said that that's the one that the Buddha was using when he got enlightened. And there's a lot of research on it being beneficial too. So keep it simple.
I try to do 20 minutes a day. I've spent some time at Deer Park Monastery, Thich Nhat Hanh's place, and still though, every day thoughts come in and it's just a constant battle. But now I try to breathe through those thoughts. But it's amazing the difference between the days when I meditate and the days when I don't.
Yeah, it does, it adds up, I think, to a lot of positive change. But you have to remember too, I mean, what I teach, and the reason I think surfing is a great metaphor is that it's not about stopping the waves. It's like about being able to get an objective perspective on them a little bit, because you're not going to just, I mean, I've been on retreats where I was silent for 20 days. And even then, like, it's like the waves are still small, but they're there. Like, you get more space between them. And it's not, I think there's a misconception that meditation's about stopping thought. And it's not. It's more about being able to, like, not like the waves of thought not owning you. So it's really like becoming an expert surfer. Like, you are out there and you can be like, oh, there's a thought of jealousy. I'm not going to ride that one, like, bad wave. And then, another wave comes through and it's like, hey, I should give my grandma a call today. I miss her, and you're like, oh, maybe I will do that. That's a nice idea. But so I think realizing too that those waves aren't like, you're not making them. They're coming in on their own. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of it too.
I love also that you've surfed in some of the most conflicted areas of the world. Jerusalem, Palestine, India. Can you talk about surfing in some of these places and what you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, those stories from India and Indonesia are I was up in the Himalayas, so I wasn't doing a lot of surfing up there. And then in Jerusalem is actually like a journalism story that's more just about being over there and getting into some heated situations. So not every story is a surfing story, but I have, been in some interesting areas, but surfing's taken me to some really cool areas. And I don't feel like I have any stories where, like, I was on some far-flung island in Indonesia and, like, got confronted by a militia or something, but it's gotten me further out than I otherwise would have, and I'm grateful for that.
So you also, well, actually, let's talk about writing first. Writing a book, writing a screenplay, writing in general, being a surfing writer takes an element of discipline and an element of faith. So what habits and routines do you stick to that you try to do daily?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always try to get my writing done first before I get into Facebook or email or anything, because I just notice writing takes so much energy and so much focus that if you have anything trying to pull you in another direction, you'll just stop. So for me, I'm a morning writer. Like, I drop the kids off at school and then I just go right to that. And then I do all my, like, emails and Facebook and stuff in the afternoons or calls. Because I notice if I do that stuff first, I'm just drained and I can't focus. So, that's the biggest one. But then also writing takes, I think, going back to the meditation piece, like, if my mind is just really stormy, like one wave on top of the other, I could write all day and I don't think I would say anything useful. So I have to sort of come back to a little bit of silence too, so the waves can find space. And that's where I usually get my best ideas. And then I can write, a little bit. That's where I think a lot of the creativity comes from, or surfing, or just being outdoors. It's one of those things where some writers say they just, like, sit down 8 hours in the chair. Like, for me, I've got to, like, do an hour and then go walk around the block, or do a couple hours, go for a surf. And then, like, the things that I'm working through in the narrative start getting worked through out there. Yep. And then I can come back and put them down. So
I always write really well when I'm running and surfing, and then I never have a pen. It drives me nuts. I don't know if this ever happens to you.
Totally. No, I'm one of those people who gets out my phone all the time, and I just have to, like, jot down ideas really quick, or I'll be like, or I'll come in from the surf and be like, scribbling to get an idea down before it leaves. But yeah, I mean, no question, creativity is less about trying than, like, getting out of your own way a little bit. And so anything that I think gets you out of your own way it's going to inspire better ideas.
I'm really enjoying this conversation, and you just have such a calming Zen voice that hopefully those listening too just feel a little bit calmer and more Zen.
Hopefully they can understand me and I'm not like just droning on.
No. It's great. So this show is about having a wild idea and making it a reality. There's getting over fear, and then there's committing. So what advice can you give to those what's one piece of advice that you can give to those who just want to live a little bit more wildly and free?
I think the best advice for committing to your dreams is remembering every day that you're going to die. It sounds a little bit morbid, but there's a sort of daily Buddhist reflection that like you're gonna, you're not here forever, and think about how quickly your life has passed so far, and how, because oftentimes we get caught up in like the worst case scenario is that, I'll be, what if I'm like go into debt, or what if what if I'm alone, if I break up with that girl or that guy, and when you get at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, if you remember, what, like I am not immortal. Like this is real. It's not a dress rehearsal. And at some point I'm going to be on my deathbed looking back, and what advice would I have for myself in at that point? And it's, for me, it's always bravery enhancing, because I'm like, what do I have to lose really? I would rather live a shorter life, like taking it by the reins or grabbing the bull by the horns, or whatever metaphor you want to use, than be on my deathbed being like, what, I went for it, I failed, but at least I didn't live, not knowing. And most likely, you're not going to fail. You can't really fail, because every failures are actually like the deepest learning experiences. And if you really jump, almost always there's, if you quote fail, it's actually like pointing you toward just the next lily pad. So those are a couple of reflections that I
like that.
use.
I thought the lily pad analogy it's just a beautiful visual. When you talk about death, it's interesting because you recently lost your father, and I thought your post and writing about losing a father, your father you had beautiful writing about it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. He, that's where I get a lot of that particular reflection actually, is that my dad, got cancer pretty young for how healthy he was. He was, got stage 4 lung cancer when he was about 65, and I was a really healthy guy otherwise. But he had always had this sort of joke about death, like, I might be dead tomorrow. And when he finally did get the diagnosis, he didn't panic. He was just like, I've been thinking about this for decades, and he said he always loved that Peter Pan quote, I think death will be the greatest adventure. And through all the chemotherapy, everything, he had the best sense of humor. He was always, and sometimes he would say, what, that his last years were his best years, even though he sometimes felt sick, because he was like really present. We actually developed maybe our best part of our relationship was when he was sick. And so it's a bummer sometimes where death is this focusing thing, and you're like, oh my God, I haven't appreciated my dad all these years. He's such an amazing guy. And I did appreciate him, but never like I did when I knew I was going to lose him. And I think it's the same for us. Like, we don't really realize like it could happen anytime, right? Like, my journalism friend who's like in her 30s just died of cancer, and you don't know. And so if you're not living every day committed to your true values or your heart, it's like, what are you doing? It's not, you don't have that long as you think.
Yeah, no, and I think those are really important lessons. I mean, I lost my dad when I was a kid, just suddenly, and I was like, I have to live life to the fullest. That was the one lesson I took from it. I mean, it took a lot of lessons, but that's the one that kind of forced me to try to live life to the fullest. Sometimes to a fault, but I think that's good advice. And I love what you talk when you said about failure was also really beautiful, because so much of this show is talking about success, but so many of the people I've interviewed have had to have a lot of failure to get there.
Yeah, I think that's across the board. I mean, it's there are very few people, I think, like, who are world leaders or, folks like, whatever, Desmond Tutu or, Gandhi, who just had it easy. It's like, it's the challenges that I think allow them to be who they are. And yeah, that's why, you're one of my inspirations. So, and I didn't know that about your dad. So it's often those challenges that allow you to, go for it. So.
Well, that being said, what advice would you give to your 15-year-old self? And I know your 15-year-old self was like a little skate rat, up to no good, having fun.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it would be like, don't be a little skate rat up to no good. It would.
I know you're a good kid. I was teasing you.
I think, no, I know. I wasn't. I mean, there are things that I think I could have done better back then. But again, it was like, that led me to wanting to run away, which was a formative experience. I wouldn't want to do it differently, but I think always what I want to tell to myself every year that I look back is I always have this feeling like I'm not getting enough done, like this anxiety hanging over me, a little bit of like, no, I can't go out and, drive the coast right now and look for some waves because, I've got this assignment and, it just, I think there were times in my life when now I'm truly busy. Like now I have real commitments where I have to be there for my kids. Like I have to be there to pick them up at school. And before that point, even when I was 15, 16, 17, I felt like overbooked. And there were so many times where I think I could have, drop the guilt, I guess I'm saying, like drop the guilt about like being like, oh, I should be doing more, and just enjoy those wild times, where, cause you really, when you're 15, in your 20s, you don't have as much responsibility as you think you do. So
that's true.
I think I got to do a lot of fun things, but I think there were times where I felt guilty about that. I would love to tell myself then, like, hey man, like it's all good. You're going to be fine. Just enjoy it.
I don't even have kids, but this adulting thing is it's challenging. We think
taking care of yourself is a lot.
Just having kids, though, I can only imagine. So what's the best gift, or actually, what books do you recommend? You're a writer. So what books do you love and do you read and just have really shaped you?
I'm a big Salinger fan. So, I mean, as far as like literature goes, like I love his simple style. So like, Franny and Zooey, if you've ever heard that book, is one of my favorites, and Catcher in the Rye. I just like, I've always been a big fan of that simple style. And then, I think for surfing, I'm a big fan of Tim Winton. Like I loved Breath. It got, it was, I think just his prose are inspiring to me. He's an Australian novelist for folks who haven't read him. And I highly, Breath is a book about two friends growing up on the Australian coast and like big wave surfing. It's probably one of the few books besides Finnegan's recent memoir that's like a true work of literature about
I've
surfing.
never even heard of him. That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, you should check it out. It has some dark twists.
Okay.
But I don't read a ton of like outdoor adventure
That's
memoir or stuff like that. But I love history books. So I've been reading Alexander Hamilton's biography. And I highly recommend it for right now, like in this time in our political history. Every American needs to read Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton. It just talks about, how our Constitution and the founding principles of, civil rights and liberties that we have. And I think right now, it should be required reading. So I'll plug that right now.
Okay. Well, definitely everybody needs to go read that. Yeah, this is an interesting time in the world. You wrote a kid's book. That's the one other thing I wanted to ask you about. How was that? That must have been a joy.
It was rad. Yeah. I wish I could write kids books all the time because
Turtles Don't Surf, right?
Turtles Don't Surf.
Oh, yeah. A nice title.
Yeah. You can get it on my website. It's the only place, JaimalYogis.com. I'll send you a signed one. But yeah, it was so fun. I illustrated it. I did it actually not even imagining I would sell them. I made it for our son. Our first son was late in the belly, and we were like 2 weeks past due date. And I was like, all right, already, come on, man, we want to meet you.
Aww.
And I'd taken time off work, and I remember I went out actually to Rockaway Beach in between here and Pacifica, and I was sitting in a little cafe just watching the waves. It was a super big swell. And I just jotted down this little rhyming story that I thought I would give to him about a turtle who wants to surf, and he lives in this area of the ocean where it's forbidden for turtles to surf. Like, it's just a dolphin. Dolphins and pelicans are doing it, and he wants to go against the grain. And so, and then when he came home from the hospital, I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And we were taking turns, like watching him as he slept, because we were like paranoid new parents, and we're like, oh my God, is he breathing? And I would just stay up like doing these little sketches, and then I turned it into a book. But I hope to do more for my other two boys. I've been slacking on that a little bit.
You're not. You're the least. You're far from being a slacker. You've got a movie, Saltwater Buddah. We didn't even get to talk about that, but I think what we're going to do is have to have you on for round 2 when All Things Are Water comes back out, or comes out to everyone.
Yeah, that would be rad. I'd love that.
So Jaimal, thank you so much for being on. To the people listening right now, we'll have links on where to get Jaimal's books, including Turtles Don't Surf, in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much, Jaimal. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I actually feel way more zen. So hopefully if you're listening, you feel more zen too.
Thanks, Shelby. It was really fun.
Awesome. Talk to you soon. Hopefully you're now ready to grab life by the reins, or the bull by the horns, however that saying goes. Love talking to Jaimal, always. You can get his books on his website, JaimalYogis.com. I will also have links on my show notes on the podcast website. You'll go to wildideasworthliving.com, click on Jaimal's show. Underneath, I'll post a ton of links. If you liked this show, I'd love it if you could review it on iTunes or email me. I'm easy to reach, just Shelby@wildideasworthliving.com. If you have feedbacks or comments, I'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Don't forget, the best adventures happen when you follow your wildest ideas. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hug your neighbor. We'll see you next week.